Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1: The Midnight Theft. It was a night of peculiar stillness in the hill town of Shimla. The moon, pale and cloud-veiled, threw long shadows over the terraced gardens and the great banyan trees that bordered the old Somerville residence. The house itself stood slightly apart from the town, a relic of the Raj, with wide verandas, tall shuttered windows, and, at its heart, a spacious courtyard fragrant with jasmine and bougainvillea. The servants had retired, the last of the guests had gone to bed, and the ticking of the great clock in the hallway was the only sound that broke the silence. Then, at precisely midnight, the household was jolted awake by a shrill cry followed by the clanging of the courtyard bell. "Thieves! Thieves in the house!" came the voice of Lady Eleanor Somerville, trembling and panicked. Doors flew open, footsteps thundered along the corridors, and lights flickered to life one by one. Colonel Arthur Somerville, tall, grey-haired, and still every inch a soldier, emerged from his study in his dressing gown, clutching a revolver. "What in blazes is going on?" he barked, striding toward his wife's chambers. Lady Somerville stood near the open door of her bedroom, her hands trembling. Her normally composed features were pale. "Arthur, the necklace! My mother's necklace! It's gone!" Within minutes, the entire household had gathered: Miss Clara Somerville, the Colonel's bright-eyed niece, Mr. David Ashcroft, a family friend who had been staying for the week, and Mr. Bhattacharya, the quiet, impeccably mannered house steward. The servants hovered uncertainly at the doorway, whispering among themselves. The Colonel immediately ordered the staff to search the house and grounds. Lanterns bobbed through the courtyard, casting restless shadows upon the flagstones. The heavy air carried the scent of rain, it had drizzled earlier, and the faint fragrance of crushed roses. But the search yielded nothing. No broken locks. No open windows. No footprints beyond the courtyard stone path. When the local police arrived half an hour later, the house was already in turmoil. Inspector Prasad, a capable and courteous man, examined the scene with practiced calm. "You are certain, Lady Somerville, that the necklace was in the safe when you retired?" "Quite certain," she replied. "I placed it there myself after dinner, around 10 o'clock. I remember distinctly because Arthur was teasing me about keeping it under such heavy lock and key." The Colonel snorted. "I said the thing was safer in the Bank of England, not that you shouldn't lock it up." The inspector examined the small wall safe, neatly hidden behind a framed watercolor. There were no signs of forced entry. The key lay in Lady Somerville's dressing table drawer, untouched. "It seems to have been opened with the correct key," said Prasad, frowning. "How many people possess one?" "3, replied Lady Somerville. "My husband, myself, and the steward, Mr. Bhattacharya, who handles the household accounts." The steward bowed slightly, his face expressionless. "Yes, Sahib, but my key is always in my keeping. I did not even approach this room tonight." Poirot was not yet upon the scene, but already, the seeds of mystery were sown. By morning, the theft had become the sole subject of gossip in the quiet European quarter of Shimla. Some whispered that the servants must be involved, others suggested the theft was an inside affair. But none could explain how the thief had managed to enter, open the safe, and vanish without trace. It was at this point that Lady Somerville, in her distress, remembered a certain distinguished visitor staying at the Grand Imperial Hotel, a gentleman famed across continents for his unparalleled powers of detection, Monsieur Hercule Poirot. At 11 o'clock that morning, a sealed note bearing Lady Somerville's crest was delivered to his suite. "Monsieur Poirot, I implore your assistance in a matter of utmost delicacy. A theft has occurred at our home. A family heirloom of great sentimental and historical value has been taken under circumstances most baffling. The authorities are at a loss. Might I entreat you to call upon us at your earliest convenience? Yours sincerely, Eleanor Somerville. Poirot, who had just finished a modest breakfast of toast and coffee, read the letter with lifted eyebrows and an expression of quiet satisfaction. Ah, Hastings, mon ami, you see? Even here, in the peace of the mountains, crime stretches out her little hand. Captain Hastings, ever eager for an adventure, leaned forward. A theft, you say? Something valuable. A necklace, Poirot replied. And mark well, it is not the value alone that draws me. There is a phrase that intrigues me, under circumstances most baffling. It suggests finesse. And where there is finesse, there, my friend, you will find Hercule Poirot. By mid-afternoon, a sleek motorcar was making its way up the winding hill road to the Somerville estate. Poirot sat upright, immaculate in his grey suit and patent leather shoes, his moustaches glistening like a work of art. Hastings, beside him, admired the scenery but noted how intently Poirot's eyes studied the landscape. You are observing something? Hastings asked. Always, Poirot murmured. For example, the courtyard I see in the distance, large, enclosed, with but one gate. A thief who chooses such a house for his mischief either knows it well or is very foolish. I shall be interested to learn which. The car drew up before the grand white portico. Colonel Somerville greeted them briskly, though his manner betrayed unease. Glad you could come, Mr. Poirot. Damned nuisance, all this. My wife's in quite a state. Dash thing's been in her family for generations. Poirot inclined his head politely. And naturally, Colonel, you wish to recover it, and perhaps, to understand how it vanished, OUI. Inside, the air was cool and faintly scented with lavender. Poirot's gaze swept the hallway, the marble staircase, and the open doors that led onto the courtyard beyond. A beautiful house, he said softly. And yet, I sense it does not sleep peacefully. Lady Somerville entered, composed yet clearly distressed. She was tall, elegant, with silvering hair arranged perfectly. Her hands trembled as she greeted Poirot. Thank you for coming, Monsieur Poirot. I feel utterly at a loss. Nothing in my life has ever been so strange. Courage, madam, said Poirot gently. We shall find the truth. Always there is a reason, even when it hides beneath appearances. She led him upstairs to her chamber. The safe stood discreetly against the wall, the painting still askew from where it had been moved. Poirot examined it minutely, the lock, the keyhole, the hinges. Then he stepped back, his eyes half closed in concentration. He turned suddenly toward the open windows that looked down into the courtyard. Ah, you left these open last night. Just the inner shutters, she replied. It was warm. Poirot nodded. And the courtyard below, was anyone there? I cannot say. It was dark. He stood silently for a moment, then smiled faintly. I thank you, madam. I believe already the courtyard wishes to speak to me. Perhaps tomorrow, when I walk there, it will whisper its secrets. As Poirot and Hastings descended the staircase, the evening sun slanted across the marble floor. A shadow fell from the balcony, long and thin, like a finger pointing toward the courtyard below. Poirot paused. His eyes followed the direction of that shadow, and his lips curved into the slightest of smiles. You see, Hastings, he murmured, the scene is set. The stage is perfect. Now we wait for the players to reveal themselves. And with that, Hercule Poirot, neat, precise, and quietly confident, stepped into the Courtyard of Shadows. Chapter 2, The Courtyard and its Shadows. The morning sun filtered softly through the shutters of the Somerville residence, casting latticed patterns upon the polished floor. From the garden below came the chatter of birds and the gentle splash of water from the courtyard fountain. Yet, within the house, a quiet unease persisted, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Hercule Poirot, precise as ever, appeared for breakfast in a perfectly pressed light grey suit, his moustaches gleaming and his tie exactly aligned. He joined Colonel and Lady Somerville at the long teak table under the veranda. Captain Hastings, as always, was by his side, observing everything with honest curiosity. The household tried to appear calm, but the tension was unmistakable. Lady Somerville poured tea with trembling hands. Colonel Somerville spoke curtly, his manner brisk and controlled, though his eyes betrayed his frustration. "I have questioned every servant in the house, Monsieur Poirot," the colonel said, buttering his toast with unnecessary force. "Not one of them can explain how the devil the necklace vanished. It's beyond comprehension." Poirot nodded gently. "And yet, Colonel, comprehension is precisely what we must achieve. The crime, you see, is like a locked room, closed, but not sealed. We need only to find the tiny crack through which the truth has escaped." The colonel grunted. "All I can tell you is that the safe was properly locked, no window forced, and nobody could have entered from the outside. Botticelli keeps the keys accounted for. He's been with us for 15 years. 15 years is indeed a long time," said Poirot softly. "One begins to feel part of the furniture. Yet even furniture can sometimes hide a secret, n'est-ce pas?" Lady Somerville sighed. "Monsieur Poirot, I would stake my life on Botticelli's honesty. He is loyal and trustworthy. This must have been done by someone who knows us, someone inside the family, perhaps." Her eyes flickered uncertainly toward her niece, Clara. Clara Somerville looked up at once. "Aunt Eleanor. Surely you don't believe—" "My dear child, I did not say that," said Lady Somerville quickly, but the momentary glance had not escaped Poirot's notice. His sharp green eyes gleamed with interest. Families, he thought, always reveal more than they intend. When breakfast ended, Poirot requested permission to walk through the courtyard alone. The courtyard of the Somerville residence was a square of serenity, marble stones worn smooth by years of use, a small fountain at its center, and along one side, a line of potted roses, their blooms heavy with morning dew. Overhead, a pergola of vines cast dappled shadows across the ground. Yet beneath its beauty, Poirot sensed something unsettled, a hidden discord. He began his methodical inspection. Every detail caught his eye, a faint scuff on the lower wall, a snapped rose stem lying beneath a lattice window, and the faint smell of sandalwood that lingered in the air. He bent down, touching the broken stem lightly with his gloved fingers. "Curious," he murmured. "Roses do not break themselves." Hastings, watching nearby, frowned. "You think the thief escaped through here, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps, mon ami. Or perhaps the courtyard was only a stage upon which the thief wished us to look." They were soon joined by Botticelli, the steward. Dressed neatly in a white curta and dark waistcoat, he approached with calm dignity. "Monsieur Poirot, I have taken the liberty of ordering tea for you. You must be weary after your journey." Poirot inclined his head. "You are most considerate, monsieur. Tell me, this courtyard, it is closed entirely, yes? No gate, no secret exit?" "There is only the main gate leading to the drive," Botticelli replied. "Always locked at night. The keys are kept by the watchman, and he did not leave his post. I checked personally after the alarm was raised." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are thorough, I see. And your own duties last night, were you awake when the alarm sounded?" The steward's expression did not change. "No, monsieur. I was in my room, reading." When I heard the bell, I came immediately. Poirot studied him keenly. The man's composure was perfect, perhaps too perfect. His hands, however, bore faint traces of varnish, as though he had been polishing furniture or handling tools. Poirot made a small note in his pocket-book but said nothing. Later that afternoon, Poirot requested that all members of the household gather in the drawing-room. It was a bright, high-ceilinged space overlooking the courtyard, filled with colonial furniture and family portraits. Lady Somerville and her husband took their places on the sofa. Clara stood by the window, and David Ashcroft, the family friend, lounged in a chair with an air of studied nonchalance. Poirot surveyed them with a mild smile. "Miss Amos, I thank you for your patience. I wish only to ask a few questions. Nothing unpleasant, merely the truth." He began with the Colonel. "You, monsieur, were in your study last night?" "Yes. I was reading. I heard Eleanor's cry and went upstairs at once. And during the evening before that, I stayed in the study. Wrote letters. Had a whiskey before turning in. Nothing unusual." Poirot nodded. "And your key to the safe, Colonel?" "In the top drawer of my desk, as it always is." Poirot turned to Lady Somerville. "Madam, you say you locked the necklace away after dinner. At what hour precisely?" "About 10 o'clock, I should think," she replied, glancing briefly at her husband. "Then I went to my room to read." "Did anyone else enter your room afterward?" "No one. I was alone." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You are certain?" "Yes," she said firmly, though her eyes flickered once more toward Clara. Poirot made another quiet note. "Now, Mademoiselle Clara," he said kindly. "Where were you at 10 o'clock?" Clara hesitated only slightly. "I was in my room, writing letters. I went to bed soon after. I didn't hear anything until the alarm." Poirot observed her closely. She was young, frank-faced, but her hands were clasped tightly. There was tension there, not guilt, perhaps, but fear. Finally, he turned to David Ashcroft. "And you, monsieur? Where were you last night?" Ashcroft gave a light laugh. "Out on the veranda for a smoke. Couldn't sleep, the altitude plays tricks on one's nerves. I went out for air around 11. "Ah, indeed? And you saw nothing?" "Nothing at all," Ashcroft said, too quickly. "It was quiet." Poirot regarded him thoughtfully. "And yet," he said, almost to himself, "you did not mention this to the inspector this morning." Ashcroft stiffened. "I didn't think it important." Poirot's smile was thin. "Sometimes, monsieur, the thing we think least important is the key that unlocks everything." When the questioning ended, Poirot and Hastings stepped once more into the courtyard. The afternoon light was fading, and long shadows stretched across the marble tiles. The air was heavy with the perfume of the roses. Poirot stood silent for a long while, his hands clasped neatly behind his back. "Well, Poirot," said Hastings, "what do you make of it? Who's your suspect?" Poirot gave a small, enigmatic smile. "At present, my dear Hastings, I suspect everyone, and therefore, no one. But I have already learned something most interesting." "Indeed? What's that?" "That the thief," said Poirot quietly, "did not come into the house last night. He was already here." Hastings blinked. "Already here?" Poirot nodded gravely. "Oh, mon ami. Within these walls, among these charming people, sits someone who has lied. I do not yet know who, but the courtyard, I think, will tell me." He looked once more at the broken rose by the wall, and a faint smile played upon his lips. "There," he whispered, "lies the first whisper of the truth. and as dusk settled over the Somerville residence, the courtyard shadows deepened as though they too were guarding their secret. Chapter 3: The Locked Safe and the Missing Key. The following morning dawned clear and bright, the air cool and scented faintly with pine from the surrounding hills. Yet within the Somerville residence, the atmosphere remained tense. Servants spoke in whispers, glancing nervously toward the upper corridor where Lady Somerville's bedroom lay. In the courtyard below, the gardener was trimming the rose bushes, the faint snip of shears the only sound that broke the uneasy calm. Hercule Poirot, immaculate as ever in his dove-grey suit and polished shoes, stood by the fountain, gazing into the rippling water as though the truth itself might be reflected there. When Captain Hastings joined him, Poirot turned, smiling faintly. "Ah, mon ami, this house is like a stage after the curtain has fallen. The play has been acted, and now we must reconstruct the performance from the traces left behind." Hastings laughed. "You make it sound theatrical, Poirot. It's just a simple burglary, surely." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A simple burglary, Hastings?" "Non. A simple burglary is noisy, clumsy, vulgar. But here, nothing was broken. Nothing forced. Only the necklace has vanished, as if it walked away of its own accord. That, my friend, is theatre." He lifted his cane and pointed delicately toward the balcony above. "Come, to understand the mind of our thief, we must begin where he began. We shall visit the scene of the crime once more." Upstairs, Lady Somerville awaited them, visibly strained. She greeted Poirot with weary politeness. "I fear you will find nothing new, Monsieur Poirot. The inspector spent hours here yesterday. He even examined the curtains." "Nevertheless, madam," said Poirot gently, "to see with one's own eyes, that is always best. And my eyes, you will find, are sometimes very particular." The safe stood behind the same framed watercolor, neatly recessed into the wall beside the dressing table. Poirot moved toward it slowly, his gaze sweeping over every detail, the faint outline of the painting's frame on the wallpaper, the scratches near the keyhole, the pattern of dust on the floor. "Madam, may I ask you to open the safe for me?" Lady Somerville hesitated only a moment before producing her small brass key from a drawer. She turned it carefully in the lock, and the door swung open with a smooth click. Inside were several velvet boxes, a few papers, and a folded letter. The space where the diamond necklace had lain was conspicuously empty. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Ah, it is as I thought. The lock is untouched, the hinge is unmarked. No instrument was used here." Hastings frowned. "Then how could anyone have opened it without the key?" Poirot smiled slightly. "A question most pertinent, mon ami. There are, you see, only 3 keys, one for the Colonel, one for Lady Somerville, and one for Monsieur Botticelli, the steward. We must therefore examine all 3. He took out his notebook. "Madam, you have yours here. The Colonel, I think, has his in the study. As for the steward, perhaps you will ask him to bring his key at once." Colonel Somerville arrived first, brusque and impatient. He handed over his key with a grumble. "I told the inspector all this already. It's been in my desk since the day we installed that blasted safe. No one else touches it." Poirot inspected the key minutely. It was clean, polished, and entirely ordinary. Next came Lady Somerville's, delicate, with a small pearl charm attached to the chain. Finally, Botticelli entered, silent and solemn, holding his key upon a ring of several others. "Here, Monsieur Poirot," he said quietly. "You will see, it is exactly as it has always been." Poirot examined it closely, and his brows rose ever so slightly. "Curious," he murmured. "You have used this key recently, perhaps?" The steward looked faintly surprised. "No, monsieur." Not since last week, when I locked the household accounts away. Poirot tapped the key's shaft lightly with his fingernail. There is a small residue of oil, and a scratch, very fine, just at the base of the teeth. You see it, Hastings? Hastings peered closer. Barely. You've the eyes of a hawk. Not a hawk, Hastings, Poirot corrected. Merely order and method. One notices when something is not quite as it should be. The steward remained calm. Perhaps, monsieur, it brushed against another key in my ring. Perhaps, said Poirot softly. Or perhaps it brushed against a file. He said no more, but the steward's composure faltered for a heartbeat, just enough to interest Poirot further. After dismissing them, Poirot stood silently in the room for several minutes, gazing at the open safe. He noted the faint imprint of the necklace's velvet case, the dust-free ring where it had rested, and the slightest trace of something oily upon the inner rim of the door. Finally, he turned to Lady Somerville. Madam, may I ask, did you perhaps polish the safe recently? Polish it? Certainly not, she said. I hardly ever touch it. Then, said Poirot quietly, someone else did. When they descended to the courtyard once more, Hastings could no longer contain his curiosity. So what do you think, Poirot? The steward's key was used. Poirot shook his head slowly. Not his key, a copy. Someone had access to it long enough to make a duplicate. The scratch upon the edge suggests a mold or file was used. The question, mon ami, is when and why. He began pacing slowly along the courtyard's edge, his eyes scanning the ground. I have already seen that the thief had time, perhaps days, to prepare. There was no haste, no violence. Only precision. He paused beside the fountain, where the sunlight glittered on the water's surface. But mark this, Hastings, the thief could not have taken the necklace for money alone. Such calmness, such daring, it is born not of greed, but of necessity. There is, I think, another motive entirely. Hastings frowned. Necessity? You mean blackmail? Poirot's expression softened. Perhaps. Or perhaps something gentler, the wish to protect another. The theft may be only a mask, mon ami, worn to hide a deeper drama. Just then, Clara Somerville appeared on the veranda above. She had been watching from the balcony, her expression troubled. Monsieur Poirot, she called softly, may I speak with you? Poirot bowed slightly. But of course, mademoiselle. The voice of youth, it is often the one that tells the truth. She descended the steps quickly, her pale muslin dress brushing the flowers. I don't know if it's important, she said in a low voice, but last night, before the alarm, I heard someone walking in the corridor near Aunt Eleanor's room. I thought it was my uncle, but now I'm not sure. The steps were light, slower, careful. Perhaps, a woman's. Poirot regarded her intently. You are observant, mademoiselle. And you did not mention this before. I didn't think it mattered, she said helplessly. Everything happened so quickly. Poirot nodded. Everything, yes, but not by chance. You have done well to tell me. He looked toward the house, his gaze thoughtful. So, someone walked those corridors before the cry was raised. The necklace vanished. The safe was opened with a copy key. And in all this, there is no sign of entry, no trace of struggle. He smiled faintly. We begin to see the shape of the pattern, Hastings, but only its outline. The color, the design, those will come later. As they returned toward the veranda, Poirot stopped once more beside the roses. The broken stem from the previous day still lay where he had left it. He lifted it gently and turned it in his fingers. Even a rose, Hastings, he said softly, bleeds when it is broken. The question is, who wished to pluck it? And with that quiet observation, Poirot replaced the rose upon the wall, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The case of the missing necklace, he knew, was no longer about theft alone. Somewhere within that tranquil house, among its whispers and shadows, lay a truth far more delicate and far more dangerous. Chapter 4: Whispers Among the Roses. The next morning dawned with a fine golden mist that hung low over the hills. The Somerville residence stirred to life slowly, servants moving quietly about their duties, the faint clang of china from the kitchen, and the distant hum of a motorcar descending toward town. Yet beneath the surface calm, the air still vibrated with unease. The theft had left a shadow that no amount of morning sunlight could quite dispel. Hercule Poirot, after his customary breakfast of hot chocolate and rolls, stepped into the courtyard with Captain Hastings beside him. The marble floor, washed clean by the gardener, gleamed faintly, the fountain sent up its rhythmic murmur, and the scent of roses lingered, heavy and sweet. Poirot inhaled deeply. "Ah, Hastings, the air is pure and yet, I think, not entirely innocent. There is something in it that troubles the mind, as a discordant note troubles a melody." Hastings laughed lightly. "You mean the scent of guilt, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps, mon ami. But guilt is like perfume, it clings to everything it touches. One need only follow the trail." He knelt suddenly by the rose bushes, where a broken stem jutted out awkwardly among the blooms. "You see this, Hastings?" It was snapped by a hand, not by accident, but in haste. And here, a faint mark on the wall beside it. Someone climbed, or leaned heavily. "Do you think that's how the thief escaped?" "Or entered," said Poirot softly. "But let us not rush. The garden reveals its secrets slowly, one petal at a time." At that moment, light footsteps approached from the veranda. It was Miss Clara Somerville, her face pale but determined. She carried a straw hat in one hand and greeted Poirot with a polite smile. "I thought I might take a walk before it gets too hot," she said. "Excellent idea, mademoiselle. But perhaps you will indulge an old man with a few questions while you enjoy the fresh air." She hesitated only briefly. "Of course." Poirot began to stroll beside her along the colonnade, his cane tapping lightly on the tiles. "You were most helpful yesterday," he said. "You told me of hearing footsteps in the corridor near Lady Somerville's room. Have you remembered anything more?" Clara frowned thoughtfully. "Only that the steps stopped, as if the person hesitated outside my aunt's door. Then I heard a faint sound, like metal against wood, perhaps." "A key?" Poirot nodded slowly. "A sound of unlocking, perhaps." "I didn't think of it then," she admitted. "I assumed it was my uncle checking on her. But this morning, I heard him telling the inspector he never left his study." "Indeed," murmured Poirot. "And you trust your hearing, mademoiselle?" She smiled faintly. "I was half asleep, but yes, I'm certain of what I heard." Poirot's gaze rested on her kindly. "You have a clear mind, mademoiselle, and perhaps also a kind heart. It is sometimes dangerous, that combination." Clara looked away quickly, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "You think I'm keeping something back, don't you?" Poirot bowed slightly. "I think, perhaps, you wish to protect someone. And protection, in cases such as this, can be as misleading as deceit." She drew a slow breath. "You're very perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. But I assure you, I know nothing more." Poirot inclined his head. "Then we shall say no more of it. For now." As Clara walked off toward the far end of the courtyard, Poirot turned back to Hastings. "There is something that troubles the young lady. She conceals it with courage, but her eyes, they betray her." "You think she's shielding someone?" Hastings asked. "Possibly. It is always so in these domestic dramas. The family tie, the bond of affection, it makes one blind where one should see. He tapped his temple gently. That is why I use the little grey cells, Hastings. They are not swayed by sentiment. A movement on the veranda caught his eye. Mr. David Ashcroft, the family friend, appeared in his cream linen suit, smoking a cigarette. He strolled down the steps with studied ease, though Poirot noticed a flicker of tension in his manner. "Good morning, Poirot," he said lightly. "Still chasing shadows among the roses?" "Indeed, monsieur," replied Poirot. "Sometimes shadows tell more truth than sunlight. You were fond of the courtyard, I think." Ashcroft shrugged. "It's peaceful. I often come here after dinner. Helps me think." "Ah, to think, yes. But last night, monsieur, were you thinking also?" Ashcroft froze momentarily. "I beg your pardon." "Your lighter, monsieur," said Poirot mildly. "It was found beneath the rose bushes this morning. Engraved with your initials. You recall dropping it, perhaps?" Ashcroft's face reddened. "Good heavens, yes. I must have dropped it during my smoke. I was out here for a few minutes before going to bed. Silly of me not to notice." "Indeed," said Poirot softly. "A very few minutes, you say? You saw nothing, heard nothing? Nothing unusual?" Poirot inclined his head. "Of course. And yet, monsieur, it is a curious coincidence that you were out here, alone, within the very hour that the necklace vanished." Ashcroft's lips tightened. "Are you accusing me of something, Poirot?" Poirot smiled pleasantly. "Accuse? None. I merely observe. It is my habit." Ashcroft exhaled sharply, crushing his cigarette beneath his heel. "I see. Well, if you're quite finished observing, I have letters to write." He turned and strode back toward the house. Hastings watched him go. "His rattled, Poirot. That lighter clearly bothers him." Poirot nodded. "Oh, and yet, perhaps not for the reason we imagine. Fear of discovery may come not only from guilt, but from the wish to hide another's guilt. There are many forms of loyalty, my friend, not all of them wise." By late afternoon, Poirot had gathered everyone in the drawing room. The air was close, heavy with the scent of sandalwood from a burning incense stick. Lady Somerville sat on the sofa, pale and drawn. Colonel Somerville stood by the fireplace, his arms folded, irritation etched on his face. Botticelli stood discreetly near the door, expression unreadable. "My friends," Poirot began, "forgive me if I intrude upon your time. But I must ask a few final questions concerning last night." He moved first to Botticelli. "Monsieur, this scent, sandalwood, I noticed it also in the corridor yesterday, faintly. You use it often?" The steward inclined his head. "Yes, monsieur. I burn incense in my room each evening. It calms the mind." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but last night, it was not burned. The holder was cold when I examined it this morning." A flicker of surprise passed across the steward's face. "Perhaps I forgot." "Perhaps," said Poirot softly. "It happens even to the most careful men." He turned next to Lady Somerville. "Madam, one small question. You locked the safe yourself, yes?" "Yes. With my key." "And afterward, you placed the key in your handbag?" "Yes, at once." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then I must ask, did anyone handle that handbag between 10 o'clock and the time of the alarm?" Lady Somerville hesitated, glancing toward her husband. "No one." "I think not." "Think carefully, madam." She clasped her hands. Mr. Ashcroft brought it to me, I believe. I had left it in the drawing room after dinner. He returned it before I went upstairs. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Merci, madam. That is most illuminating. He stepped back, surveying the room, the faces turned toward him, some uneasy, some defiant. So, he murmured, the key may have changed hands. The lighter fell in the courtyard. The scent of sandalwood moved where it should not be. Little details, Miss Amos, but they speak, if one listens. He smiled, his eyes bright with satisfaction. I begin to hear whispers among the roses. And very soon, those whispers shall become words. Outside, as the evening fell, the courtyard glowed in the fading light. The fountain murmured softly, and the petals of the roses drifted one by one into the water, as if nature itself were dropping clues for Poirot to gather. He stood by the window, gazing down. You see, Hastings, he said quietly, it is always the small things, a key, a rose, a whisper in the dark, that lead one to the truth. Chapter 5, The Scent of Sandalwood. The morning after Poirot's gathering dawned with a curious stillness. The usually cheerful birds in the courtyard seemed subdued, as though they too sensed the tension lingering over the Somerville estate. A light drizzle had fallen before sunrise, leaving the flagstones dark and gleaming, and a faint fragrance of wet roses drifted through the open windows. Poirot, dressed impeccably in a pale grey suit with his hat tilted at a precise angle, stood in the hallway, gazing thoughtfully at the grand staircase. Hastings approached with a cup of tea, his expression one of concern and mild impatience. Poirot, he said, Inspector Creighton is beginning to lose patience. He believes it's a straightforward theft, the servants or one of the guests. He's threatening to search the entire staff's quarters. Poirot smiled faintly, shaking his head. Ah, the good inspector, always so fond of action, and yet so indifferent to reflection. He would uproot the tree to find the fruit, when one need only observe where the wind has carried the seeds. Then you still think it's someone in the family? Poirot raised an eyebrow. Or close enough to the family to know where the key was kept, and what sentiment might prevent suspicion. There is loyalty here, Hastings, but of a kind that binds as tightly as chains. Hastings frowned. You're speaking in riddles again. Poirot chuckled softly. Then let us make the riddle clear. Come, mon ami. We shall visit Monsieur Botticelli's quarters. It is time to follow the scent of sandalwood. The steward's room was situated at the rear of the house, overlooking the servants' garden. It was neat to the point of austerity, a narrow bed, a writing desk, and a single shelf of well-worn books. The air carried a faint trace of incense, though Poirot noticed at once that the holder on the table was freshly polished and unused. Botticelli entered quietly, bowing slightly. You wish to see me, Monsieur Poirot? Ah, yes, monsieur. You are most obliging. Poirot's tone was warm but measured. You have been many years in the service of the Somervilles. 15, monsieur. Since the colonel was posted in Bombay. I was his aide, and later came with him to England. Then you are trusted. I hope so. Poirot nodded, glancing at the incense holder again. You told me yesterday you forgot to light this last night. Forgive me, it is a small thing, yet I find it curious. You seem a man of habit. A brief silence followed. Then Botticelli said quietly, I was not in my room for much of the night. Ah, murmured Poirot. And where were you? The steward hesitated. I was walking in the courtyard after the storm passed. The roses were heavy with rain, and I thought the air might ease my mind. I heard movement near the study, footsteps, and I saw someone pass along the veranda. Someone? You could not identify them. No, monsieur. The light was poor. But I think it was a woman. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A woman, you say? And yet Lady Somerville had retired early. Miss Clara, perhaps. I cannot be certain. Poirot inclined his head. You are an honourable man, Monsieur Botticelli. I thank you for your candour. One final question, the key to the courtyard gate, where is it kept? In the butler's pantry, on a hook by the door. It is rarely used except by the gardener. Merci, monsieur. That is all. As they stepped out, Hastings looked puzzled. Do you think he's telling the truth? Poirot's moustache quivered. He tells the truth as far as it suits his conscience. But there is more. He saw a woman. Hastings, and perhaps he knows which woman. Yet he will not say. Loyalty, again. That afternoon, Poirot found Miss Clara Somerville seated alone in the library, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant. She started slightly as he entered. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly. Is there news? Not yet, mademoiselle. Only whispers. But whispers can grow loud when one listens well. She smiled faintly, though her eyes looked tired. You sound as though you already know the truth. Ah, no, mademoiselle, not yet. But I begin to see its outline. Poirot took a seat opposite her. May I speak frankly? Of course. You are anxious, not merely for the lost jewels, but for someone's reputation. Perhaps for someone you care about. Clara's lips parted, and she looked away. You think me foolish. Not foolish. Compassionate. But compassion can be dangerous when it blinds us to reality. Tell me, mademoiselle, on the night of the theft, did anyone ask you for the key? Or for information about the safe? She hesitated, then said in a low voice, Mr. Ashcroft asked about the necklace earlier that evening. He said Lady Somerville was unwise to keep such a treasure in a simple safe. He asked who had the key, and I told him my aunt always kept it in her bag. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. Indeed. And when your aunt went upstairs, did he remain in the drawing room? Yes, for a time. I left him there when I went to fetch some papers for uncle. Poirot nodded slowly. And when you returned? He was gone. Poirot rose gently. Merci, mademoiselle. That will be all. As he left, Hastings followed him into the corridor, whispering, so Ashcroft had both the knowledge and the opportunity. Poirot smiled thinly. Yes, but motive, Hastings, motive. Why steal from those who treat you as family? Unless the theft was not for gain, but for another purpose entirely. That evening, Poirot stood once again in the courtyard as dusk deepened around him. The roses glowed faintly in the twilight, and the fountain's reflection shimmered like liquid glass. The air carried a delicate hint of sandalwood, faint, elusive, but unmistakable. Poirot frowned. Curious. The scent again. He followed it to the base of the far wall, where the plaster showed a faint smear of something dark. Kneeling, he touched it lightly and examined his fingers. Ash, he murmured. Sandalwood ash. Someone stood here, recently, burning incense. But why? Just then, a rustle made him turn. Colonel Somerville stepped from the shadows, his face grim. Poirot, he said curtly, I hope you're not about to accuse my staff of treachery. Botticelli has been with me longer than most of my friends. Indeed, said Poirot evenly. He is loyal, perhaps too loyal. Tell me, Colonel, has Mr. Ashcroft ever had debts? Or financial difficulties? The Colonel hesitated. None that I'm aware of. He's lived comfortably off his late father's estate. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps his motive was not money. Perhaps something subtler, honor. affection, or fear? The colonel scowled. You speak in riddles, man. Riddles, yes, but soon the answer will be plain. Poirot looked up at the roses above him, their petals catching the last of the light. There is one piece still missing, Colonel. One small truth that ties together all these loyalties and lies. When I find it, the picture will be complete. That night, as the house settled into uneasy silence, Poirot sat at his desk in his guest chamber, making neat notes in his pocket diary. Key passed from Lady Somerville to Ashcroft. Lighter found beneath roses. Scent of sandalwood, out of place. Steward's loyalty unwavering. Miss Clara anxious. Colonel defensive. Each protects another. The necklace may not be far. He tapped his pen against the page, then wrote one final line. Truth hides not in darkness, but in the heart afraid of light. Closing his diary, Poirot leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. Tomorrow, Hastings, he murmured, we shall invite them all once more to the courtyard. The roses, they will witness the truth. Chapter 6, The Gathering at Dusk. The following evening arrived cloaked in an amber stillness. The Somerville estate, usually serene at sunset, felt curiously watchful, as if the very walls waited to hear what would be said. Servants moved about softly, their voices subdued, and the air held that uneasy quiet which precedes a storm, not of weather, but of revelation. Hercule Poirot had requested, with his unfailing politeness, that all the principal members of the household and their guests meet him in the courtyard at 7:30. His tone had been calm, but his eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, promised that the evening would not be ordinary. By the appointed hour, the sun had dipped low, washing the courtyard in shades of gold and rose. The fountain murmured gently, scattering small ripples across its marble basin. Lady Somerville sat upon a wicker chair, her lace shawl drawn close. Colonel Somerville stood near the balustrade, his brow furrowed. Mr. Ashcroft leaned against a pillar, cigarette in hand, trying to appear at ease. Miss Clara Somerville lingered near the roses, her hands clasped tightly, while Botticelli stood discreetly in the background. Poirot and Hastings entered last. Poirot's white suit gleamed faintly in the dying light. He bowed slightly to Lady Somerville. Merci, madam, for indulging me once more. I fear I have tried your patience, but tonight, I think, we come to the end of our little puzzle. I do hope so, Monsieur Poirot, Lady Somerville said wearily. This business has quite ruined my sleep. Poirot smiled faintly. Sleep will return, madam, once truth takes its rightful place. He walked slowly to the center of the courtyard, his hands clasped behind his back. I have asked you all to gather here because, as I have discovered, this place, this beautiful courtyard, is where every secret of the night is hidden. The roses have listened. The stones remember. Hastings glanced at him, half amused. You mean you found something, Poirot? Not something, mon ami, someone. There was a slight movement among the group. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch delicately before continuing. The theft of the emerald necklace was not a crime of greed, he said. It was an act of protection, of desperation, even. Someone sought not wealth, but concealment. Colonel Somerville frowned. Concealment? Of what, exactly? Of shame, perhaps. Or love. Or a promise made long ago. Poirot turned his gaze upon the colonel. Let us begin at the beginning. The safe was locked by Lady Somerville herself. The key, we are told, remained in her handbag. Yet someone knew precisely where that handbag was kept, because, monsieur, he inclined his head toward Ashcroft, you yourself returned it to her room, did you not? Ashcroft's hand stilled on his cigarette. I did. I found it on the drawing-room sofa and thought she might need it. How considerate, murmured Poirot. And yet, How curious that your lighter should later be discovered beneath the rose bushes outside this very courtyard. That is not, I think, the behavior of a man who retired early." Ashcroft stiffened. "You're suggesting I was out here that night." "I suggest nothing, monsieur. I merely observe. You said you came out for a smoke before bed. But Monsieur Botticelli also took a walk, and he saw, how did he put it? The figure of a woman near the veranda." All eyes turned toward Clara, who paled slightly. Poirot's gaze rested upon her gently. "Mademoiselle, I think it was you." Clara's lips trembled. I did come down, yes. I couldn't sleep. I heard voices." "Voices?" Lady Somerville exclaimed. "In the house." "In the courtyard," Clara said quietly. "Mr. Ashcroft and Botticelli. I saw them talking. It looked serious." The colonel turned sharply toward his steward. "Botticelli, what's this nonsense?" The steward bowed slightly. "It is true, Colonel. Mr. Ashcroft came to me late that night. He said there was something urgent, a matter concerning Lady Somerville's jewels." Ashcroft dropped his cigarette, his composure fracturing. "I only wanted to warn him. I'd overheard one of the servants asking about the necklace earlier that evening. I feared there might be a theft, and thought he should check the locks." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Ah, how noble, and yet, how unfortunate that this warning required you to take the very key from Lady Somerville's handbag." Ashcroft's voice hardened. "That's absurd." "Is it?" Poirot asked softly. "You see, monsieur, the lock of the safe shows no signs of force. The thief had a key. Only one person besides Lady Somerville handled that key that night, you." Ashcroft took a step forward, his face flushed. "If you think I'd steal from my oldest friends, you're mad." Poirot raised a finger. "No, monsieur, not steal. Return." Ashcroft froze. "What?" "Return something that did not belong in the safe. The necklace was placed there earlier that day, but it was not whole. One of the emeralds had been removed and replaced with a clever imitation. I believe you discovered this, and rather than expose the truth, you sought to remove the necklace entirely, to protect someone. Perhaps Miss Clara." A collective gasp ran through the group. Clara shook her head wildly. "No. That's not true." Poirot's voice was calm, almost tender. "No? Then shall I tell you what I think truly happened? The missing emerald, mademoiselle, was not stolen by you, but by your mother, years ago, before her death. It was pawned to pay debts, I suspect. Lady Somerville never knew. When the necklace came into your possession after her passing, you feared discovery. You confided in Mr. Ashcroft, who tried to spare you shame." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "How could you possibly know that?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Because, mademoiselle, when I examined the imitation emerald this morning, yes, I found it behind the lining of Lady Somerville's jewel box. I saw initials scratched faintly on its back. CS, the jeweller's mark was Clara Somerville's. You had it replaced to keep the heirloom intact." The courtyard fell into utter silence. Lady Somerville looked stricken, the colonel's face had softened from anger to shock. Poirot continued gently. "Mr. Ashcroft, in his loyalty, tried to recover the necklace before Lady Somerville noticed the substitution. He meant to hide it, perhaps have the missing stone replaced, and then return it quietly. But when the alarm was raised, he panicked. The necklace remained hidden, until now." Ashcroft's shoulders slumped. "You're right. I couldn't bear to see her ruined. I only wanted to put things right." Lady Somerville rose slowly. "Oh, David, you fool. Her voice trembled. You should have told me. Ashcroft looked at her with exhausted eyes. You've lost enough already, Edith. I didn't want you to lose your niece's affection as well. Poirot inclined his head. A gallant motive, but misguided. For lies, even when born of love, grow heavy with time. He turned to Botticelli. You, monsieur, knew the truth too. You followed Mr. Ashcroft that night, hoping to prevent disaster. That is why the scent of sandalwood was on the breeze. You had burned incense to mask your absence from your room. The steward bowed his head. I could not betray him, monsieur. Poirot sighed softly. Loyalty again, the chain that binds this household tighter than iron. As the evening deepened and the fountain's murmur filled the silence, Poirot looked upon them all with quiet compassion. The necklace, I believe, is hidden still in the base of that fountain, beneath the marble slab. A convenient place, cool and safe. He stepped closer to the roses, plucking a single petal and letting it fall into the water. Tomorrow, we shall recover it. And perhaps, at last, peace will return to this house. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. You see, mon ami, the theft was only the symptom. The true crime was silence. And silence, as I have often found, can wound more deeply than any dagger. Chapter 7, The Truth Beneath the Fountain. Morning came softly to the Somerville estate, gilding the mist with threads of light. The courtyard lay hushed and still, save for the gentle trickle of the fountain and the flutter of wings among the roses. Yet beneath that fragile peace, a tremor lingered, the uneasy calm that follows confession, though not yet absolution. Hercule Poirot was already awake. He sat by the window of his guest room, moustache neatly trimmed, his breakfast tray untouched. His mind, ever precise, was turning over the final pieces of the puzzle, and finding them to fit with satisfying clarity. When Hastings entered, still buttoning his waistcoat, Poirot rose briskly. Come, mon ami. We have work to do before the day grows hot. Hastings blinked sleepily. Work? I thought you'd already solved it last night. Poirot smiled, tapping his temple. Solved in the mind, yes, but justice, Hastings, must be made visible. We must bring forth the truth not merely in word, but in proof. Proof? Poirot lifted his cane. The necklace, Hastings. It awaits us beneath the fountain. The courtyard was bathed in gentle light when they arrived. Botticelli was already there, kneeling by the fountain with a bucket and cloth, as if attempting to restore some lost order to the house's heart. He rose quickly upon seeing Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, he said respectfully. You are up early. As are you, mon cher steward, said Poirot pleasantly. You polish the marble, yes? How very industrious. But I fear today, it is I who must disturb your work. He glanced around. The roses shimmered with dew. Clara Somerville stood by the veranda steps, pale but composed. Lady Somerville, though weary, had come down as well, leaning on her husband's arm. Mr. Ashcroft, looking hollow-eyed, remained slightly apart, his usual charm stripped away by the weight of sleeplessness. Poirot regarded them all with that familiar air of calm command, gentle, but irresistible. You are so good to humour me once more, Miss Amiss. Let us proceed with delicacy, like a surgeon removing the last splinter from a wound. He approached the fountain, gesturing to Botticelli. Monsieur, you know this structure well. Would you kindly remove the lower panel of marble? It is loose, I think. The steward hesitated. Loose, monsieur? Poirot nodded. Ah, yes. A fine workman may notice such things. A small crack at the base, easily overlooked by most. But my little grey cells, they do not overlook. Botticelli fetched a tool from the gardener's shed and, with careful pressure, pried open the panel. A faint grinding sound echoed through the courtyard. Behind it lay a small recess, dark, shallow, and unmistakably man-made. Within, wrapped in a piece of velvet cloth, lay a gleam of green and gold. Lady Somerville gasped. Clara covered her mouth. Hastings whistled softly. Poirot stepped forward and took up the bundle with almost reverent care. Unfolding it, he revealed the emerald necklace, its gems glinting with a dull, watery brilliance. Poirot's tone was soft. Voila! The object of so much fear and secrecy. Ashcroft closed his eyes. You were right, he murmured. I hid it there. After the alarm was raised, I panicked. I thought if I kept it safe, I might explain everything later, but later never came. Poirot gave a small, sympathetic nod. You acted foolishly, monsieur, but not wickedly. Still, concealment breeds suspicion, as surely as a shadow follows the sun. He turned to Lady Somerville. Madam, I beg you to examine your necklace. You will find that one emerald, the largest, bears faint scratches on its edge. It is not original. The imitation was made some years ago, by a jeweller in Brighton. Lady Somerville's trembling fingers touched the stone. You're right. Edith had it repaired after a small accident, or so she told me. Her eyes widened. You mean Clara's mother? Poirot inclined his head gently. Yes, madam. The late Mrs. Somerville was in financial distress. To protect her family's name, she pawned one emerald and replaced it with a copy. When she passed, her daughter discovered the truth but concealed it, wishing to preserve your trust. That, I think, is the burden Miss Clara has carried all this time. Clara's eyes shimmered. I only wanted to make it right, to find a way to replace the stone one day. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd think less of her. Lady Somerville's sternness melted. She crossed the courtyard and gathered the girl into her arms. Oh, my dear child, you should have told me. Your mother was foolish, not wicked. Love can drive one to strange acts. Poirot smiled softly. Indeed, madam. And love is at the heart of every mystery, whether it leads to salvation or sorrow. Colonel Somerville cleared his throat. Well, then. If all this is true, the matter ends here. No need for police, eh? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The law concerns itself with theft, yes, but this was not theft, only concealment. The inspector, I think, will be content with a formal statement that the matter was domestic. Ashcroft exhaled heavily. You have no idea what relief that brings, Poirot. Still, I've made a fool of myself. Poirot's voice was kind but firm. A fool perhaps, but a loyal one. Yet let us not forget, monsieur, that loyalty, too, must bow to truth, or it becomes deceit dressed in noble clothes. Botticelli, who had stood silently, now spoke in his calm, measured tone. Monsieur Poirot, may I ask, how did you know where to look? Poirot smiled modestly. Ah, that was simple. When I stood here yesterday, I noticed the faint scent of sandalwood rising from this very spot. The recess had trapped the fragrance from the incense you burned that night, a small detail, invisible to the eye, but not to the nose. And you, monsieur, burn incense only in your room, never here. Therefore, the scent betrayed the hiding place. Hastings chuckled. You amaze me, Poirot. Always the smallest thing. Poirot spread his hands elegantly. But of course, mon ami. The smallest thing, the scent, the lighter, the broken rose, they are the alphabet of truth. One need only read the words they spell. Later that morning, as the household slowly recovered from its long ordeal, Poirot walked once more among the roses. The air was cool and fragrant, the fountain now ran clear, free of secrets. Clara joined him quietly. "Will you stay for dinner tonight, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked. Poirot smiled. "Ah, no, mademoiselle. My work here is done. And besides, the great detective must not linger where peace is newly restored. It would seem almost indecent." Clara looked at him thoughtfully. "You've given us peace, though. We owe you more than we can say." Poirot shook his head. "You owe me nothing. Truth, mademoiselle, is its own reward, though it is not always kind." She smiled faintly. "You mean my mother's secret?" Poirot's expression softened. "Yes. But also your courage. Few would carry such a burden to protect another's memory." He touched his hat and turned toward the veranda. Hastings waited there, suitcase in hand. "Poirot," he said as they walked together, "you're satisfied then?" Poirot looked back at the courtyard, now bright with morning sun. "Satisfied, yes. The mystery is solved. Yet I find myself reflecting, in every family, there are courtyards of shadow, where silence grows like ivy. One must prune them from time to time, or they choke the light." As they left the Somerville estate, the air grew lighter, the road winding toward the distant hills. The case of the missing necklace had ended not in handcuffs, but in reconciliation, a rare conclusion, even for Hercule Poirot. Yet somewhere deep within his immaculate mind, another question stirred, one final detail, small but unresolved. He smiled faintly to himself. "Perhaps," he murmured, "we are not quite finished after all." Hastings glanced at him in alarm. "Not finished? Good heavens, Poirot, what now?" Poirot merely patted his arm. "All in good time, mon ami. All in good time." And the hills echoed softly with their laughter as the morning sun rose high above the courtyard of shadows. Chapter 8: The Final Revelation. The carriage wheels rolled softly along the gravel road as Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart the Somerville estate. The sun shimmered through the trees, scattering gold upon the fields. Yet Poirot, seated perfectly upright, was silent, too silent for Hastings' liking. After a time, Hastings ventured, "You're unusually quiet, Poirot. Surely the case is done, necklace found, honor restored, no one harmed. What more could trouble you?" Poirot's moustache quivered faintly. "Mon ami, do you not recall what I told you yesterday? The truth must be visible, seen by all, accepted by all. But here, I fear, the truth has been only half seen." "Half seen?" Hastings frowned. "But you said—" Poirot raised a finger. "Patience, Hastings. Let us reason with order. Who hid the necklace?" "Mr. Ashcroft." "Bien. And who replaced the emerald years ago?" "Mrs. Somerville, Clara's mother." Poirot nodded slowly. "And who discovered that secret later?" "Clara." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, my friend, when I examined the necklace this morning, I found something that did not belong. Not only was one emerald imitation, two were." Hastings blinked. "Two? OUI. Two, mon cher." The second stone had been substituted more recently, not by the late Mrs. Somerville, but by another hand entirely. Hastings sat upright. "You mean someone else tried to steal from the necklace again?" Poirot leaned forward. "Not steal, but cover the theft. The second imitation was crude, hurried, made with modern paste. It was meant to deceive, but only for a short while." Hastings rubbed his forehead. "Good heavens, Poirot, who would do such a thing?" Poirot smiled faintly. "That, Hastings, is what we shall discover, for I have arranged one final meeting before we leave." The gathering. The household assembled once more in the drawing-room, the final act of a play performed in silence and restraint. Outside, rain clouds gathered, muting the light. Poirot stood by the mantelpiece, his small frame emanating calm authority. Lady Somerville sat erect in her chair, hands clasped tight. Clara stood by the window, pale but resolute. Ashcroft shifted uncomfortably, while Bhattacharya, impassive as ever, hovered near the door. Poirot began softly. "Miss Amiss, you are weary, I know. But before I depart, I must correct one last injustice. For though the necklace has been found, the full truth has not." He turned toward Bhattacharya. "Monsieur, yesterday, you asked how I knew of the hiding place. But tell me, did you not already know what was concealed beneath the fountain?" The steward's composure cracked for the first time. "No, monsieur, how could I?" Poirot's voice sharpened. "Because it was you who placed the second imitation emerald among the others, and you who feared discovery when I began my little investigations." Gasps rippled through the room. Bhattacharya's expression hardened. "You accuse me without proof." Poirot gestured gracefully toward the side table, where the necklace now lay. "The proof is here. The velvet cloth in which the necklace was wrapped, it bears traces of sandalwood oil, the same kind you use in your private prayer lamps. No one else in this house handles that scent." Lady Somerville's eyes widened. "Bhattacharya, is this true?" He hesitated, then bowed his head. "Yes, madam. But not as theft. I only meant to protect you." "Protect me," she whispered. Bhattacharya spoke with quiet anguish. "When the alarm was raised that night, I feared that Mr. Ashcroft would be accused. I found the fountain panel ajar and the necklace inside. I realized he must have hidden it. But one emerald was already missing, perhaps lost, perhaps stolen long ago. I replaced it with glass so that the necklace would seem complete. I thought if I returned it later, none would suffer shame." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Your loyalty, monsieur, is admirable, but misplaced. For truth cannot bloom in the soil of deceit, no matter how well intentioned." Tears welled in Lady Somerville's eyes. "You foolish, kind man. You should have told me." Bhattacharya bowed. "Forgive me, madam. I feared dishonor would touch the household." Poirot stepped forward, his tone gentle once more. "And so we see, each soul here acted from love, not greed. The mother, who replaced one emerald to save her family, the steward, who replaced another to save his master's name, the suitor, who hid the necklace to protect the woman he loved. And at the center of it all, Mademoiselle Clara, who bore the silence for them all." He turned toward her. "You see now, mademoiselle, how love can twist upon itself like a vine, noble in its root, but strangling in its reach." Clara's voice trembled. "It seems we've all been guilty, in some way." "Oh, Poirot said softly. "But there are many kinds of guilt, and not all demand punishment. Only truth, laid bare, can restore harmony." For a long moment, the room was still. Then Lady Somerville rose, crossing to Bhattacharya. "You have served us faithfully for 20 years. I will not have you dismissed for kindness." She looked to Poirot. "Monsieur, we are in your debt." Poirot bowed slightly. "None, madam. I am merely the mirror that shows what was already before you." The departure. The rain began just as Poirot and Hastings stepped outside. The courtyard, glistening under the downpour, looked reborn, its marble clean, its air sweet with wet roses. Hastings exhaled. So, after all that, no one was wicked. Poirot smiled beneath his umbrella. "Ah, my dear Hastings, wickedness is a matter of degree. Here, the crime was not against law, but against truth itself. And that, too, must sometimes be mended." They reached the gate where the hired carriage awaited. Poirot paused to look back one last time. Through the rain, the fountain shimmered, no longer a hiding place, but a symbol of release. Hastings followed his gaze. You know, Poirot, you might almost say the courtyard kept its secret until it was ready to be washed clean. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Just so, mon ami. The world, too, keeps its secrets until the rain of understanding falls. They climbed into the carriage. The horses started forward. Poirot leaned back, adjusting his gloves with satisfaction. One learns much from the English countryside, he mused. Such tranquillity, such patience. Even a mystery, when told politely, resolves itself without scandal. Hastings chuckled. You mean you solved it without a murder for once? Poirot sniffed. Do not underestimate the drama of theft, Hastings. In human hearts, a missing emerald may cause more pain than a bullet. As the carriage turned the bend and the estate disappeared from view, Poirot murmured softly, order restored, the harmony of the household renewed, yes, I am content. Then, with a faint smile, he added, though I confess, I shall never again trust a fountain that sings too sweetly in the dark.